In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
The Imperium of man spans 1,000,000 worlds, each one a monument to suffering, zealotry, and the desperate struggle for survival. Heroes are martyrs. Hope is a luxury reserved for the faithfully ignorant. Into this hellscape of endless conflict, where even the mightiest warriors are but cogs in an incomprehensible machine of war, fate delivered something the grimdark future was utterly unprepared for. A man who thought he was too cool to die. The dimensional rift opened above the contested world of Grax's Prime with all the subtlety of a bad hangover. No augur arrays detected it. No astropaths sensed its approach. One moment, the toxic gray sky was empty, save for the mushroom clouds of orbital bombardment. The next, reality tore like cheap fabric, vomiting out a single figure who fell 3,000 feet while checking his hair. Duke Nukem hit the ground in a crater that shouldn't have been survivable. Boots first, knees bent, sunglasses somehow still perfectly positioned. Rubble bounced, dust settled. He stood up, cracked his neck, and surveyed the apocalyptic battlefield stretching to every horizon. Guess the GPS is out. The landscape was a butcher's canvas. Trench lines stretched for miles, filled with the corpses of soldiers in gray greatcoats and gas masks. Wrecked tanks the size of small buildings smoldered in fuel fires that painted the sky orange. In the distance, something enormous and mechanical was firing artillery shells the diameter of transit buses. The sound arrived seconds after the muzzle flash, a physical force that rattled Duke's teeth. He brushed dirt off his red tank top, checked his pistol, still loaded, and started walking toward what looked like a command post. Halfway there, he stepped over a corpse and paused. The body was wrong. The greatcoat was standard military issue, but the man underneath was barely 16, his face gaunt with malnutrition, his hands calloused beyond anything Duke had seen. A metal tag around his neck read, 2847th Graxis Conscript Battalion. Conscripts, Duke muttered. Great, I'm in the asshole of the universe. A last bolt screamed past his ear, superheating the air. Duke dove behind a wrecked Chimera transport, coming up with his Devastator spinning. 3 figures in the same gray uniforms were advancing, laser guns raised, screaming something about heresy and the Emperor's light. Their eyes had the manic gleam of true believers. "Whoa, whoa, same team, Duke shouted. They opened fire. Last bolts cracked against the Chimera's hull, molten metal dripping. Duke's smirk disappeared. Wrong answer. The Devastator roared. Micro-missiles streaked across 50 yards and detonated in a chain of fire that sent body parts spiraling into the ash-choked air. Duke stood, surveyed the carnage, and shook his head. Your ROE sucks. More soldiers emerged from the trenches, dozens of them, then hundreds. They didn't run toward him with gratitude for killing the enemy. They ran toward him with bayonets fixed, screaming prayers to someone called the Emperor. Duke's tactical mind, honed through decades of alien invasions, processed the situation in half a heartbeat. Wrong planet, wrong universe, really wrong welcome wagon. He triggered his jet boots. Experimental Earth tech screamed to life, launching him 200 feet into the air. Below, the soldiers opened fire. Last bolts creating a lattice of energy where he'd been standing. Duke soared over the trench lines, eyes scanning for anything that looked like neutral ground. What he saw made even his confidence falter. The battlefield stretched to the horizon in every direction. Millions of soldiers locked in grinding attrition. Tanks the size of apartment buildings, artillery pieces that looked like they belonged on warships. And in the distance, something worse. Green-skinned brutes the size of trucks, wielding guns cobbled together from scrap metal and sheer insanity, charging Imperial lines with bellowing laughter. "Okay," Duke said to himself as his boots sputtered, fuel depleting. "Time to find out where the hell I am and who needs their ass kicked." He landed in a bombed-out administratum building 3 miles behind the front lines. The structure was Gothic architecture crossed with a bureaucrat's fever dream. Skulls carved into every surface, statues of armored figures pointing accusingly at nothing, and enough Latin inscriptions to fill a seminary. Duke kicked open a door, marked with a 2-headed eagle, and found himself face to face with a command center. 20 officers in elaborate uniforms were hunched over a hololithic map, shouting orders into voxcasters. None of them noticed him enter. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me, I'm looking for the complaint department." 20 heads turned. 20 pairs of eyes widened. One officer, a rail-thin man with more medals than chest space, reached for his bolt pistol. "Identify yourself, heretic, or face summary execution." Duke looked down at his civilian clothes. Red tank top, blue jeans, combat boots. He looked back at the officer. "Name's Duke Nukem. I kill aliens, save babes, and chew bubblegum." He smiled. "And brother, I'm all out of gum." The officer's finger tightened on the trigger. Duke's hand blurred to his own pistol, faster than any unaugmented human should move. The golden Desert Eagle was aimed between the officer's eyes before the bolt pistol cleared its holster. "But I'm real low on patience, too. So how about we skip the dick measuring contest and you tell me what planet this is, who I'm killing, and where I can get a beer?" For a long moment, nobody moved. Then a new voice spoke from the shadows. A woman's voice, cold and precise as a scalpel. "Stand down, Colonel Vrecht. This one is interesting." A figure emerged from the darkness at the rear of the command post. She wore form-fitting black armor adorned with the inquisitorial eye, and her eyes held the calculated curiosity of a scientist examining a new specimen. An inquisitor. Duke didn't know the term yet, but he recognized the type. Intelligence agent with executive authority and zero sense of humor. "I am Inquisitor Hellstadt of the Ordo Xenos," she said, circling him like a predator. "And you, stranger, are either the most sophisticated Genestealer infiltrator I've ever encountered, or something far more dangerous." She smiled without warmth. "Let's find out which." The interrogation room was exactly what Duke expected from a civilization that carved skulls into their doorknobs, stone walls, rusted chains, and the lingering smell of someone else's bad day. They'd confiscated his weapons. All of them, including the backup pistol in his boot and the pipe bombs he'd forgotten were in his jacket pocket. The guards had looked at his arsenal like archaeologists discovering a new species of extinct technology. Duke sat in a metal chair that was bolted to the floor, wrists bound with magna cuffs that hummed with power. Inquisitor Hellstadt sat across from him, a data slate in one hand and a bolt pistol in the other. Behind her, 2 hulking figures in crimson armor stood at attention. Inquisitorial stormtroopers, their carapace plating covered in purity seals and devotional scripture. "Let's begin simply," Hellstadt said, her voice clinical. "What is your name, origin world, and Imperial identification number?" "Already told you. Duke Nukem, Earth. And I don't have a number because I'm not a serial number kind of guy." Her eyes narrowed. "Earth? Terra? Holy Terra? The throne world of our God Emperor?" "God Emperor?" Duke laughed. "Lady, Earth's got presidents, prime ministers, and the occasional dictator. Nobody's worshiping them. Well, except maybe their mothers." One of the stormtroopers shifted. Hellstadt raised a hand, stopping whatever execution they were contemplating. You claim to be from Terra, yet you speak Low Gothic with an archaic dialect, wear clothing of no recognizable pattern, and carry weapons that violate 17 articles of the Codex Armamentarium. She leaned forward. Either you're a heretic savant who's invented technology that shouldn't exist, or you're lying. Which is it? Option 3, Duke said. I'm from Earth, just not your Earth. Got yanked through some kind of portal while chasing aliens. Ended up here. Your welcoming committee tried to shoot me, so I shot back. Pretty standard Tuesday for me. Hellstadt's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the data slate. You claim to be from another reality? An alternate dimension? Bingo. Smart and scary. My favorite combination. Impossible. The warp is the only realm beyond real space, and nothing emerges from it unchanged. You show no signs of corruption, mutation, or demonic taint. She stood pacing. Yet here you are, unaugmented, baseline human physiology. And according to witnesses, you survived a 3,000-foot fall, killed 3 trained guardsmen in under 2 seconds, and evaded an entire regiment's worth of last fire. What can I say? I'm good at not dying. Nobody is that good without augmentation, combat drugs, or divine intervention. Hellstadt stopped directly in front of him. Which leads to the question, what are you? Duke met her gaze with the kind of confidence that had made alien warlords reconsider their life choices. I'm the guy who's going to walk out of here, get his guns back, and find whoever's in charge of the uglies out there. Then I'm going to kill them, save this planet, and find a way home. You can help, or you can get out of the way. For the first time, Hellstadt smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. You don't understand where you are, do you? This isn't some backwater colony with a manageable Xenos incursion. This is Graxis Prime, a forge world under siege by the largest Ork seen in this sector in 3 centuries. We've lost 6 million soldiers in the last month. The Mechanicus has abandoned the orbital platforms, and the Astra Militarum High Command has authorized exterminatus protocols if the forges fall. Duke processed that. So, you're losing. We're dying slowly instead of quickly. There's a difference. Not much of one. Duke flexed against the magna cuffs. They sparked, but held. Look, I've fought aliens before. Big ones, small ones, smart ones, dumb ones. Some of them even gave me a challenge. Your Ork problem? I can help with that. You? One of the stormtroopers laughed. A harsh, mechanical sound filtered through their helmet. One man against millions of greenskins? The arrogance is heretical. Heretical. Heresy. You people use that word a lot. Duke tilted his head. Let me guess. Everything you don't like is heresy. Different opinion? Heresy? Question orders? Heresy? Refuse to die for some guy on a throne halfway across the galaxy? Also heresy. The stormtrooper took a step forward, raising his hellgun. You dare blaspheme against the God Emperor? Stand down, Merrick. Hellstadt's voice cracked like a whip. She studied Duke with renewed interest. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the most suicidal. The Emperor's divinity is not a matter of debate. It's the foundational truth of our civilization. In my universe, we had a saying, question everything. Works out pretty well. In this universe, we have a different saying. Blessed is the mind too small for doubt. She deactivated the magna cuffs with a gesture. They fell away, clattering to the floor. But I'm a pragmatist, Duke Nukem. And right now, I need pragmatism more than piety. Duke rubbed his wrists, eyeing the stormtroopers. So I'm not getting executed? Not yet. You're too interesting to waste. And if you can do even a fraction of what you claim... She gestured to the door. Then I have a proposition. There's an Ork war boss leading the assault on Hive Tertius. His name is Grogfang de Mangler. Kill him, and I'll consider your claims about dimensional travel. Fail, and you'll die alongside the rest of the defenders. And my guns? Hellstadt nodded to one of the stormtroopers, who reluctantly produced Duke's confiscated arsenal. The Devastator, his pistols, the pipe bombs, even his sunglasses, miraculously unbroken. Duke slid the shades on and grinned. Now we're talking. Where's this Grogfang guy? Leading 10,000 greenskins toward the primary manufactorum complex. You have 6 hours before they breach the walls. Hellstadt turned toward the exit. Try not to die. I have questions that need answers. Lady, Duke said, loading his Devastator with practiced ease. I've got a better track record than you think. As they exited the interrogation room into the chaos of the command post, alarms began blaring. A junior officer sprinted toward Hellstadt, his face pale with terror. Inquisitor, the Orks have broken through Sector 7. They're inside the Hive. Duke checked his ammunition. 5 clips for the pistol. 20 micro-missiles for the Devastator. Not ideal, but he'd worked with worse. Guess I'm on the clock, he said, heading toward the sound of distant explosions. Don't wait up. Behind him, Hellstadt watched the strange warrior disappear into the smoke and fury of the battlefield. She tapped her Vox bead, opening a secure channel. Interrogator Vash, are you monitoring? Yes, Inquisitor. What are your orders? Follow him. I want full combat analysis. Movement patterns, reaction times, weapon efficiency. Everything. And if he dies? Then we've learned he's just a man, with delusions of grandeur. Hellstadt smiled coldly. But if he survives, then we've found something the Imperium desperately needs. She looked at the hololithic displays showing the Ork advance, a green tide consuming everything in its path. Something unkillable. The interior of Hive Tertius was a monument to industrial brutality. Factorums stretched for miles, their ceilings lost in chemical smog, their floors slick with promethium runoff and other fluids Duke preferred not to identify. Conveyor belts carried half-assembled weapons toward assembly stations that would never operate again. The workers, emaciated figures in rags, had either fled or been torn apart by the Ork vanguard. Duke moved through the carnage like a ghost, his boots silent on the metal grating. He'd seen war zones before, but this was different. Back home, there were rules. Geneva Conventions, ROE, humanitarian organizations. Here, the only rules seem to be die for the Emperor and hope someone remembers your name. The bodies told the story. Guardsmen cut down mid-retreat, their laser guns still clutched in death grips. Civilians executed by their own commissars for cowardice when they tried to run. A servo skull still hovering in place, recording everything with dead mechanical eyes, its parchment skin flapping in the toxic breeze. Grim didn't begin to cover it. Duke's earpiece crackled. Hellstadt had given him a Vox bead before he'd left, claiming it was standard operating procedure. He suspected it was also a leash. Target is 300 meters ahead, came a male voice, younger than Hellstadt's, clinical in its precision. Grogfang de Mangler, positive identification, designated Xenos Class Omega. Approximately 9 feet tall, heavily muscled, wielding a power claw and shooter, surrounded by 37 lesser Orks. "Thanks for the heads up," Duke muttered. "You got a name, Stalker?" "Interrogator Vash. I'm providing tactical support." "Great. Try to keep up." Duke rounded a corner and stopped. The manufactorum floor ahead had been transformed into an Ork camp. Crude tents made from flayed metal, fires burning in oil drums. And in the center, sitting on a throne made of welded tank parts and human skulls, was Grogfang the Mangler. He was, Duke had to admit, impressively ugly. Green skin like moldy leather. Tusks that jutted from a jaw that could bite through rebar. One arm ended in a massive mechanical claw crackling with power fields. The other held a shoota cobbled together from 4 different weapon systems. His eyes were small, red, and filled with an intelligence that surprised Duke. This wasn't some mindless brute. The lesser orcs around him were equally grotesque. Some wore scavenged Imperial armor, others crude metal plates welded directly to their flesh. They were arguing in a guttural language that sounded like a garbage disposal having a seizure. Duke assessed the situation with the calm professionalism of someone who'd cleared alien nests solo more times than he could count. 37 enemies. Enclosed space, limited ammunition, no backup. "Just like old times," he whispered. He pulled a pipe bomb from his jacket, set the timer for 3 seconds, and lobbed it into the center of the Ork camp. The Orks noticed. One pointed. Another shouted something that probably meant grenade in their barbaric tongue. Grogfang stood, surprisingly fast for something his size. The pipe bomb detonated. The shockwave was beautiful, a perfect sphere of concussive force that sent Orks tumbling like bowling pins. 3 died instantly, their bodies shredded. 5 more were wounded, groaning and clutching limbs bent at wrong angles. Duke was already moving. He burst from cover, Devastator roaring. Micro-missiles streaked across the manufactorum floor, each one tracking a different target. Orks exploded. Body parts rained down. The survivors roared with delight. "They're enjoying this," Vash reported, his voice incredulous. "The Xenos are experiencing combat euphoria." "Yeah, they do that," Duke said, sliding behind a conveyor belt as shooter rounds chewed through the metal. "Makes them predictable." He popped up, fired 3 shots from his Desert Eagle. 3 headshots, 3 corpses. The Orks charged. Duke triggered his Holoduke. The decoy flickered to life 20 feet to his right, a perfect holographic copy. Half the Orks redirected toward it, screaming war cries. Duke used the distraction to circle left, coming up behind a group of 4. His pistol barked twice. 2 Orks dropped, the other 2 spun, too slow. Duke grabbed a fallen shoota, a ramshackle thing held together with rust and optimism, and opened fire. The weapon kicked like a mule and shot about as accurately, but at this range, accuracy was optional. The Orks staggered, holes appearing in their torsos, and kept coming. "Tough bastards," Duke muttered, switching back to his Devastator. 2 micro-missiles, 2 explosions, 2 more Orks gone. Grogfang had seen enough. He bellowed something that made the remaining Orks scatter and charged directly at Duke. 9 feet of muscle and rage, power claw raised, shoota firing on full auto. Duke dove, rolled, came up firing. His shots hit Grogfang square in the chest. Any human would have been paced. The Ork warlord grunted, stumbled, and kept charging. "Oh, you're one of those guys?" Duke triggered his jet boots, launching himself straight up. Grogfang's power claw slashed through the space he'd occupied, generating enough force to carve a trench in the rockcrete floor. Duke twisted in midair, angling his trajectory, and came down behind the warlord. He landed, dropped the Devastator, and grabbed a fallen chainsword, Imperial issue, still humming with power. The weapon felt wrong in his hands, too heavy, too barbaric, but it would do. Grogfang spun with frightening speed. His shooter came up. Duke was faster. He lunged, driving the chainsword up under the orc's jaw. The teeth bit into flesh, spraying blood and oil. Grogfang roared, more in fury than pain, and swung his power claw in a horizontal arc. Duke yanked the chainsword free and threw himself backward. The claw missed by inches, the energy field so powerful Duke felt his skin prickle. Subject is engaging Xenos Class Omega in melee combat, Vash reported, his tone shifting from clinical to fascinated. This is unprecedented for unaugmented personnel. Tell someone who cares, Duke shouted, dodging another swing. He was outmatched in raw strength. Grogfang could probably bench press a chimera. But Duke had speed, experience, and a willingness to fight dirty. He feinted left, went right, and slashed across Grogfang's hamstring. The chainsword bit deep. The orc stumbled. Duke didn't give him time to recover. He activated his steroids, the chemical cocktail flooding his system, temporarily boosting his strength and speed to superhuman levels. The world slowed. His muscles sang with power. He charged. Grogfang swung the power claw in desperation. Duke ducked under it, came up inside the orc's guard, and drove the chainsword into Grogfang's throat. The blade chewed through muscle and bone, spraying blood in arterial jets. Grogfang's eyes widened in surprise. He tried to speak, couldn't, and toppled backward like a felled tree. His body hit the ground with a crash that echoed through the manufactorum. Duke stood over the corpse, breathing hard, adrenaline still singing in his veins. The surviving orcs, maybe 10 of them, stared in shock. Their warlord, the biggest and meanest of them all, was dead, killed by a lone human. One orc, smaller than the others, made a gurgling sound that might have been a laugh. He pointed at Duke and barked something in their language. Duke didn't speak orc, but he recognized respect when he heard it. The orcs turned and fled, crashing through the manufactorum doors, disappearing into the hive's depths. Hostile Xenos are retreating, Vash reported. I've never seen orcs retreat without a fight. They lost their boss, Duke said, wiping blood off his sunglasses. No boss, no reason to stick around. Basic alien psychology. He retrieved his Devastator, checked his remaining ammunition, 3 missiles, half a clip in the pistol, and started heading back toward the Inquisitor's command post. Duke Nukem, Vash said. And for the first time, there was something other than cold professionalism in his voice. That was the most efficient Xenos elimination I've witnessed in 15 years of service. The Inquisitor will want a full debrief. She can have one, after I find a shower and something that passes for food in this hellhole. Duke emerged from the manufactorum into the gray light of Graxis Prime's toxic sky. In the distance, he could hear artillery. The war was still raging. But this section of the hive was quiet now. Secured, won. He lit a cigar he'd found on a dead officer, Imperial tobacco, harsh but effective, and started walking. Behind him, Interrogator Vash watched through a magnified scope, recording every detail. And in his private thoughts, he wondered if the Inquisitor realized what she'd unleashed. Not a savior, not a hero. Something far more dangerous. A man who refused to lose. The victory at Hive Tertius bought the Imperium exactly 4 hours of breathing room before the Orks regrouped and launched another assault on the eastern manufactorums. Duke spent those 4 hours learning that the 41st Millennium's idea of reward meant a protein bar that tasted like recycled boot leather and a bunk in a barracks where the previous occupant's blood was still on the wall. He'd tried asking about the stain. The quartermaster had looked at him like he'd asked about the weather on a planet without atmosphere. "Commissar's work," the man had said, then walked away. Duke was beginning to understand the Imperium's operational philosophy. Survival was a privilege, hope was heresy, and asking questions got you executed. It was like North Korea had colonized the galaxy and forgotten to bring joy. He was stripping down the Ork Shuta he'd scavenged, trying to figure out how something held together with literal prayers and rust could actually fire. When Inquisitor Hellstadt entered the barracks without knocking, 2 stormtroopers flanked her, hell guns at rest but ready. "You're alive," she said, as if this surprised her. Disappointed? Duke didn't look up from the weapon. "I get that a lot." Impressed, Grogfang the Mangler had a bounty of 50,000 thrones on his head. "You killed him in single combat." She gestured to a data slate one of her troopers carried. Interrogator Vash's combat footage has been analyzed by the Ordo Xenos Tactical Division. Your efficiency rating exceeds that of most Astartes neophytes. Astartes, Space Marines, the Emperor's finest warriors. Genetically enhanced super soldiers. She studied him with those cold, calculating eyes. "You're not enhanced. Our Medicaid confirmed it. Standard human physiology. No augmetics, no combat drugs in your system beyond the stimulant you self-administered during combat, though we've never seen anything quite like it." Duke held up the steroids canister. "Old Earth tech. Temporary boost. Wears off." Old Earth. Hellstadt sat on the bunk across from him, uninvited. "You keep saying that, as if Terra is somehow different in your reality. It is. We don't worship an emperor. We've got elections, democracy, freedom of speech." Duke finally looked at her. "And when soldiers die, we remember their names. All of them. Impossible at our scale. The Imperium spans 1,000,000 worlds, quadrillions of souls. Individual lives are meaningless." "Yeah, I'm picking up on that." Duke set down the Shuta, which promptly fell apart into its component pieces. He sighed. "In my world, every life matters. Every soldier is a person, not a serial number. You lose that. You lose what makes you human. Humanity is survival. Everything else is luxury." But there was something in Hellstadt's voice, a flicker of doubt, quickly suppressed. "The Imperium endures because we prioritize the species over the individual. The Imperium endures because you've got no choice. You're trapped in a permanent war with everyone and everything. And you've convinced yourselves that dying is noble." Duke lit another liberated cigar. "Where I come from, we fight so people can live, not so they can die better." Hellstadt was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost human. "You killed Grogfang with minimal ammunition expenditure and 0 collateral damage to Imperial assets. The Departamento Munitorum is confused. Our combat doctrine prioritizes overwhelming firepower and acceptable losses. You prioritize precision and personal survival. Crazy concept, not dying. It is here." She stood, pacing. "Duke Nukem, I have a problem, and I think you're either the solution or the catalyst for something worse." "I love it when women get mysterious." She ignored the quip. "The Ork Wah isn't our only threat. 3 weeks ago, we started receiving reports of cult activity in the underhive. Citizens disappearing, corpses found with modifications. The Adeptus Arbites believed it was standard heretical activity. Chaos cultists easily purged. But the patterns are wrong. Chaos cults worship the ruinous powers, Khorne, Nurgle, Tsinch, Slanesh. They corrupt through excess, violence, plague, or manipulation. She activated a holo projector. Images flickered to life. Bodies arranged in geometric patterns, strange sigils carved into flesh, structures built from bone and metal. This is something else. Organized, methodical, almost technological. Duke studied the images. They reminded him of something from his own universe, the kind of shit that happened when aliens got creative. Genestealer cult? He guessed, pulling from the briefing materials Vash had provided. Hellstadt's expression sharpened. You learned fast. Yes. We believe the cult has been festering for decades. They worship the Tyranids, extragalactic horrors that consume all biomass. The cult members are hybrids, part human, part Xenos. They look human enough to blend in, but their loyalty is to the hive mind. And you want me to clean house? I want you to investigate. The cult is embedded in the underhive's lower levels, beyond the reach of Arbit's patrols. Sending Imperial Guard would spark a full-scale uprising. We'd lose half the hive in the fighting. Sending Astartes would be seen as overkill and waste valuable resources needed on the front lines. But sending one guy with bad attitude and good aim, that's just Tuesday. Precisely. Hellstadt deactivated the holo display. You're expendable, Duke Nukem. If you die, we've lost nothing of strategic value. If you succeed, we've neutralized a threat before it metastasizes. You really know how to make a guy feel special. I'm being honest. In the Imperium, honesty is rarer than hope. She turned toward the exit, then paused. One more thing. There's a commissar attached to the 2847th Conscript Battalion. His name is Krat. He's been asking questions about you. Specifically, why you haven't been executed for blasphemy. Duke's hand drifted toward his pistol. He planning something? Commissars exist to enforce discipline through fear. They have absolute authority to execute anyone, soldiers, officers, civilians, for perceived cowardice or heresy. Her eyes held a warning. You've already blasphemed against the Emperor multiple times. You refuse to show proper respect. And you killed 3 guardsmen in your first hour on this planet. Self-defense. Irrelevant to commissars. They see the world in binary, loyal or dead. She stepped through the doorway, her voice echoing back. Watch your back, Duke. The Orks aren't your only enemy here. After she left, Duke sat in silence, processing. He'd fought alien invasions, mad scientists, and the occasional interdimensional warlord. But he'd always had backup, Earth's military, civilian support, a world that appreciated his efforts. Here, appreciation meant they hadn't shot him yet. He finished reassembling the Shuta. This time, it actually stayed together, and added it to his growing arsenal. His Devastator was down to 2 missiles. His pistol had half a clip. The pipe bombs were gone. He'd need to adapt, scavenge, improvise. Standard operating procedure for Duke Nukem. A knock on the doorframe. Duke looked up to see a young soldier, maybe 19, wearing the gray greatcoat of the 2847th. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. Sir? Commissar Krat requests your presence in the command chapel, immediately. Duke raised an eyebrow. Requests or demands? With the Commissar, there is no difference, sir. Fair enough. Duke stood, holstered his weapons, and adjusted his sunglasses. Lead the way, kid. As they walked through the hive's labyrinthine corridors, Duke noticed something. The soldiers they passed didn't look at him with the blank devotion they showed officers. They looked at him with curiosity. Some even nodded, brief, furtive gestures of acknowledgement. Word had spread. The stranger who killed Grogfang, the man without augmentation who fought like a space marine, the one who didn't recite prayers or spout imperial dogma. Duke had seen that look before, back on Earth. It was the look of people who'd found something they'd forgotten existed. Hope. And in the 41st millennium, hope was the most dangerous weapon of all. The command chapel was exactly what Duke expected. Grotesque. 50-foot ceilings carved with scenes of warfare and martyrdom. Stained glass windows depicting armored warriors crushing aliens beneath their boots. And everywhere, skulls. Real ones, mounted on pikes, embedded in walls, dangling from chains like the world's worst wind chimes. Commissar Krat stood at the altar, his back to Duke. He was tall, rail-thin, dressed in the black greatcoat and peaked cap that marked his rank. A bolt pistol rested in a holster at his hip, and a chainsword hung from his belt. When he turned, Duke saw a face that belonged in a nightmare. Scarred, severe, with eyes like chips of ice. "Duke Nukem," Krat said, his voice like gravel scraping glass. "The heretic who kills." Duke stopped 10 feet away, hands loose at his sides. "Commissar Krat, the guy who shoots his own people. We gonna have a problem?" "That depends entirely on you." Krat descended from the altar with measured steps. "I've read Interrogator Vash's report. You blaspheme against the God Emperor. You mock imperial doctrine. You reject authority. And yet, you kill the Emperor's enemies with remarkable efficiency. I'm complicated. You're a walking contradiction." Krat circled him like a shark. The Imperium has no place for individualism, no tolerance for dissent. Our strength comes from unity, from billions of souls marching in lockstep toward a single purpose. You represent everything we've spent 10,000 years purging from humanity. And yet, here I am. Yes, here you are. Krat stopped directly in front of him. "I could execute you right now, one bolt round through your skull. No trial, no appeal. Simply gone. The Inquisitor's protection only extends so far." Duke's hand didn't move toward his weapon. He'd learned long ago that fear was a weapon only if you let it be. "But you won't. Won't I?" "No, because you're not stupid. You've got an Ork tearing through your defenses and a Genestealer cult in your basement. You need every fighter you can get, even ones who don't recite your prayers." Duke smiled without warmth. "Pragmatism beats ideology when the chips are down." For a long moment, Krat said nothing. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. "You understand the Imperium better than most soldiers who've served their entire lives. Yes, Duke Nukem. Pragmatism. The Commissariat exists to maintain discipline, but we also understand necessity." He gestured to a pew. "Sit. We need to talk." Duke sat, wary. Krat remained standing. "The 2847th Conscript Battalion has suffered 93% casualties in the last month," Krat began, his tone shifting from threatening to tactical. "The survivors are conscripts, farmers, factory workers, hive scum pressed into service. They have minimal training, worse equipment, and no hope. They die in droves because dying is all they're good for." Cheerful, realistic. But something's changed in the last 6 hours. The survivors of your engagement with Grogfang have been talking, spreading stories. The man without augmentation who fights like a legend. The warrior who doesn't pray, but wins anyway. Krat's eyes narrowed. "You're becoming a symbol, Duke Nukem. And symbols are dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Dangerous because soldiers are starting to ask questions. If you can survive without faith, what does that mean for Imperial doctrine? If you can win through skill instead of sacrifice, what does that say about our methods? Krot leaned forward. You're poison, Duke. Slow-acting but lethal to everything the Imperium represents. So execute me and solve the problem. I considered it. But then I thought, what if I could weaponize you instead? Krot pulled out a data slate, brought up tactical maps. The Genestealer cult in the underhive. The Inquisitor wants you to investigate. I want you to exterminate, completely. Every hybrid, every infected, every sympathizer. Burn them out, root and stem. I don't do genocide. It's not genocide. It's pest control. Genestealers aren't human, not truly. They're Xenos corruption wearing human skin. Everyone you kill saves thousands of actual humans from being devoured when the Tyranid fleet arrives. Krot's expression was stone. This is war, Duke Nukem. There are no clean hands, only survivors and corpses. Duke considered. Back home, there were lines he wouldn't cross. Rules of engagement. But this wasn't home. These weren't humans infected with a virus. They were genetic hybrids whose existence would doom millions. Fine, I'll handle the cult. But I do it my way. No commissar oversight, no execution squads following me around. I go in, I clean house, I come back. Agreed, with one condition. Krot's smile was predatory. You take a witness. Someone to verify your kills and report your methods. Call it quality assurance. Who? The chapel doors opened. A figure entered, shorter than Duke, wearing the standard gray greatcoat, but with sergeant stripes. As they approached, Duke realized with surprise it was a woman, maybe 30, with close-cropped dark hair and a face that had seen too much combat too young. She carried a laser gun with practiced ease. Sergeant Mara Kellis, 2847th Conscript Battalion, she said, saluting Krot. Reporting as ordered, Commissar. Sergeant Kellis is one of the few survivors of the initial Ork assault. Krot explained. She's competent, loyal, and expendable. She'll accompany you into the underhive and report back on your activities. Duke looked at Kellis. She looked back, her expression carefully neutral. You okay with babysitting duty, Sergeant? I go where ordered, sir. I'm not sir, I'm Duke. He turned to Krot. She comes, she follows my lead. I'm not getting her killed because Imperial doctrine says she has to charge into gunfire screaming prayers. Accepted. Krot moved toward the exit. You leave in 2 hours. The entrance to the underhive is in Sector 12, beneath the old Prometheum refineries. The cult's primary nest is approximately 3 miles down. We estimate 200 cultists, possibly more. 200, just the two of us. Duke grinned. Finally, a challenge. After Krot left, Sergeant Kellis approached Duke, her posture relaxing slightly now that the commissar was gone. You really killed Grogfang alone? She asked. Yep. The stories say you fell from the sky without a drop pod, that you survived last fire without armor, that you fight like the Emperor's angels without their augmentation. The stories are pretty accurate. She studied him with something between awe and suspicion. Why? Why risk your life for a world that isn't yours? For people you don't know? Duke thought about that. Back home, he fought because Earth was his world, his people, his responsibility. But here, what was driving him? Maybe it was the kid soldiers with hollow eyes. Maybe it was the casual acceptance of death as the only metric of value. Maybe it was just that he couldn't not fight. It was coded into his DNA, his personality, his entire existence. Or maybe, in a universe where hope was heresy, being hopeful was the biggest middle finger he could give to the darkness. "Someone's got to show you people that there's another way," he said finally. "That you don't have to die for glory. That winning beats martyrdom every damn time." Kellis was quiet for a moment. Then, "They'll kill you for that, you know. The Commissariat, the Inquisition, maybe even the Astartes. You're not challenging the Orks or the cultists. You're challenging the Imperium itself. Been challenged by worse? I doubt that." But she smiled. A brief, fragile thing. 2 hours. I'll meet you at the armory. Try to find something better than that shooter you've been carrying. Ork weapons are as likely to explode in your hands as hit their target. "Story of my life," Duke said. As Kellis left, Duke sat alone in the chapel, surrounded by skulls and scripture. Somewhere in the underhive, a cult of genetic abominations was preparing for their god's arrival. Above ground, an Ork horde was grinding through Imperial defenses, and across the Imperium, a civilization built on suffering was slowly collapsing under its own weight. Duke Nukem, action hero from a universe where hope still existed, was about to go to war with everything the 41st Millennium represented. He checked his ammunition one more time, adjusted his sunglasses, and headed for the armory. Time to kick ass and chew bubblegum. And the 41st Millennium was fresh out of bubblegum. The armory was a cavernous space filled with enough weapons to arm a small country, and most of them looked like they'd been manufactured during humanity's Bronze Age. Duke stood before a rack of laser guns, the Imperium's standard-issue energy weapons, and tried one. It felt like holding a flashlight with delusions of grandeur. "This is what you give your soldiers?" he asked the munitions officer, a hunched man with augmetic eyes and the personality of a filing cabinet. "The laser gun is a reliable, efficient weapon blessed by the Omnissiah," the officer droned. It's a laser pointer." Duke set it down. "What else you got?" The officer's mechanical eyes whirred with what might have been offense. Perhaps the honored warrior would prefer a bolter. He produced a massive pistol, blocky and brutal. Duke took it, felt the weight, easily twice that of his Desert Eagle, and pulled the trigger at the firing range. The recoil nearly broke his wrist, and the mass-reactive round punched through 3 armored targets before detonating in a shower of ceramite fragments. "Now we're talking." Duke examined the weapon. "How much ammunition you got for this?" "Bolt rounds are restricted to Astartes and specially authorized personnel. I can provide 2 magazines, 12 rounds per magazine. 24 shots, that's it?" "Ammunition is sacred. Each round is consecrated, blessed, and..." Yeah, blessed by the Omni-whatever." Duke took the bolt pistol and the magazines. "What about explosives?" The munitions officer looked like Duke had asked for his firstborn child. "Explosives are regulated by the Departamento Munitorum. Requisition forms must be submitted in triplicate, approved by..." Duke pulled out a pipe bomb from his jacket, one he'd apparently missed during the confiscation. The officer's augmetic eyes went wide. "Forget it. I'll improvise." Sergeant Kellis arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a laser gun and wearing flak armor that looked like it had stopped maybe 1 bullet in its entire service life. She eyed Duke's arsenal, the bolt pistol, his remaining pistol, the Devastator with its last 2 missiles, and a collection of grenades he'd liberated when the munitions officer wasn't looking. "You plan to fight an army or start a war?" she asked. "Why not both?" Duke tossed her one of the grenades, Imperial issue, a frag grenade roughly the size and weight of a brick. "You know how to use this?" Pull pin, throw, take cover. We're not all savages, Duke. Could have fooled me. Your training doctrine is charge forward and die gloriously. That's not. She stopped, sighed. Okay, that's accurate. But some of us prefer to survive long enough to make the charge count. Duke studied her. In his universe, she'd be a career soldier. Competent, professional, the kind of NCO who kept units together through sheer force of will. Here, she was a sergeant in a conscript battalion, meaning she'd survived through skill when everyone around her had died through bad luck. You don't talk like the others, he said. The prayers, the emperor worship. You go through the motions, but you don't believe. Kellis glanced around, checking for listening devices or commissariat informants. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I believe the Emperor exists. I believe he protects humanity. But I also believe the Imperium has turned faith into a weapon against its own people. We don't fight for the Emperor anymore. We die for bureaucrats who've never seen a battlefield. Her eyes hardened. But I keep that to myself, because heresy gets you executed and I'm not ready to die. Smart lady. Smart enough to know you're dangerous. Not to me, to the system. You fight without faith. You win without sacrifice. If soldiers see that's possible. She let the implication hang. Revolution. Purge. The Imperium would rather burn 1 billion loyal soldiers than risk them questioning doctrine. She shouldered her laser gun. So maybe keep the blasphemy to a minimum in the underhive? I'd like to come back alive. They descended into the underhive through a service elevator that groaned like it was contemplating suicide. The shaft dropped 3 miles straight down, passing through layers of industrial waste, abandoned hab blocks, and structures so old their purpose had been forgotten. The air grew thick with chemical stench and the metallic taste of recycled atmosphere. Duke checked his weapons during the descent. Kellis watched him, fascinated. Where did you learn to fight like that? She asked. The way you move. I've seen Tempestus scions who aren't that efficient. Practice, experience, and a refusal to die. Duke loaded the bolt pistol, the rounds sliding into the magazine with satisfying clicks. I've been fighting aliens since before you were born. You do it long enough, you get good or you get dead. What kind of aliens? The ugly kind. Pig cops, octobrains, assault commanders, and things I don't have names for. Some were smart, some were dumb. All of them wanted humanity extinct. He smiled. Turns out I'm really good at making sure that doesn't happen. The elevator shuddered to a halt. The doors opened onto a scene from a nightmare. The underhive stretched into darkness, illuminated only by chemical fires and bioluminescent fungus growing on the walls. Structures rose like broken teeth, collapsed factorums, abandoned hab blocks, and makeshift settlements built from scavenged materials. Somewhere in the distance, machinery groaned and hissed. Closer, Duke heard screaming. Not human screaming, something else. Welcome to Hell's basement, Kelly said. Population, the damned and the desperate. They moved through the ruins with tactical precision. Duke took point, his enhanced situational awareness processing every shadow, every sound. Kelly's covered their 6, her laser gun sweeping arcs with practiced discipline. The first cultist they encountered was alone, scavenging through a pile of corpses. At first glance, he looked human. Tattered robes, gaunt face, desperate movements. Then Duke saw the telltale signs: elongated skull, extra joint in the fingers, purple discoloration around the neck where something inhuman was emerging. The cultist noticed them, opened his mouth to scream. Duke's bolt pistol spoke once, The mass-reactive round entered the cultist's open mouth and detonated, removing everything above the collarbone. "Emperor's mercy," Kellis whispered, staring at the carnage. That wasn't mercy. That was efficiency. Duke advanced, checking the body. It wore amulets made from bone and metal, inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at. Genestealer cult confirmed. These guys are further along than I thought. Further along? Infection cycle. First generation looks mostly human. By fourth generation, they're barely recognizable. This one's second, maybe third gen. Duke stood. Which means the pure strain Genestealers are deeper in, probably protecting the Broodlord. You know about Tyranids? Vash's briefing was thorough. Duke didn't mention that Tyranids reminded him of the aliens from his own universe, relentless, adaptive, and utterly hostile to human life. We find the Broodlord. We cut off the head. The rest of the cult collapses. They continued deeper, encountering more cultists, all alone, all engaged in mysterious activities that suggested coordination beyond human intelligence. Duke killed them efficiently. Bolt rounds for the dangerous ones, pistol shots for the scouts. A thrown knife for one unlucky hybrid who'd been relieving himself against a wall. Kellis killed her first cultist when 3 ambushed them from a collapsed ceiling. Her laser gun barked 3 times, precise shots that dropped 2. Duke took the third with his bare hands, snapping its elongated neck before it could alert others. "Good shooting," he said. Kellis looked at her hands, trembling slightly. "I've killed orcs before, chaos cultists. But these, they used to be human. Some of them might not even know they're infected. They're not human anymore. Not really." Duke's voice was gentler than usual. "You did what you had to. That's all anyone can do." They found the cult's primary nest an hour later, a massive chamber carved from the underhive's bedrock. Illuminated by bioluminescent fungus and organic growths that pulsed with unnatural life. And everywhere, cultists, hundreds of them. Duke and Kellis crouched behind a rusted storage tank, observing. The cultists moved with eerie coordination, constructing something from bone and metal and flesh. At the chamber's center, on a throne of fused corpses, sat the Broodlord. It was massive. 8 feet tall, 4 arms ending in razor claws, a skull elongated and alien. Its eyes glowed with malevolent intelligence, and its presence radiated psychic pressure that made Duke's teeth ache. 200 cultists, Kellis whispered. "And that thing. Duke, we can't." "We can." Duke checked his weapons. Last 2 micro-missiles, 23 bolt rounds, half a clip in his pistol, 6 grenades. "We just need to be smart about it." He pulled out the Devastator, aimed at the chamber's support columns, ancient rockcrete pillars holding up millions of tons of underhive infrastructure. "When I fire, run for that exit tunnel. Don't stop, don't look back." "What are you—" Kelly saw what he was aiming at. "You'll bring down the entire chamber. We'll be buried alive." "Not if we're fast enough." Duke grinned. "Trust me, I've done this before." He fired both micro-missiles. The micro-missiles streaked across the chamber in twin contrails of fire, slamming into the support columns with devastating precision. For one crystalline moment, nothing happened. The cultists looked up. The Broodlord rose from its throne, 4 arms spreading wide. Then physics remembered it had a job to do. The first column exploded, sending chunks of rockcrete the size of cars spinning through the air. Cultists disappeared beneath the debris, their screams cut short by thousands of pounds of collapsing infrastructure. The second column followed, and suddenly the entire ceiling was coming down. Duke grabbed Kellis by her flak armor and ran. Behind them, the chamber transformed into an apocalypse. The Broodlord shrieked, a sound that bypassed ears and went straight into the brainstem, triggering every primal fear evolution had installed. Cultists stampeded in all directions, trampling each other, some still trying to reach Duke and Kellis, even as the world ended around them. Duke's boots hammered against the metal grating, Kelly's matching his pace stride for stride. A chunk of ceiling crashed down 5 feet ahead. Duke hurdled it without breaking stride. A cultist lunged from the shadows. Duke shot at mid-leap with his pistol, not even slowing. The exit tunnel was 60 feet away. 50, 40. The Broodlord was faster. It came out of the collapsing chaos like a nightmare given form, 4 arms propelling it across the chamber walls with impossible speed. Its claws carved furrows in solid metal. Its psychic presence was a physical weight, crushing thought, demanding submission. Duke skidded to a halt, spun, and emptied the bolt pistol at the creature. Mass reactive rounds detonated against its carapace, blowing chunks of chitin and flesh away. The Broodlord staggered, but didn't stop. It was 20 feet away. 15. Kellis, go! She ran. Duke threw his last 3 grenades in a cluster, then sprinted after her. The explosions were swallowed by the larger cacophony of the collapsing chamber, but they bought him 5 precious seconds. They hit the exit tunnel at full sprint as the chamber behind them imploded. The shockwave threw them forward, Duke tucking into a roll that turned into a slide as the floor tilted at a 45-degree angle. Kellis tumbled past him, lost her laser gun, slammed into a wall hard enough to crack her helmet. Duke caught her on the rebound, dragged her deeper into the tunnel as dust and debris filled the air behind them. They ran blind, choking on particulate matter, the roar of destruction chasing them like the wrath of an angry god. The tunnel ended in a maintenance shaft. Duke didn't hesitate. He jumped, pulling Kellis with him. They fell 20 feet into fetid water that broke their fall and probably gave them 17 new diseases. Duke surfaced, gasping, and pulled Kellis up. She was conscious, coughing, bleeding from a cut above her eye. Cough, you insane, coughed bastard. You're welcome. Duke waded toward the shore, a ledge of corroded metal beside the drainage canal. Behind them, the destruction had stopped. The roar faded to settling debris and dripping water. Kellis collapsed on the ledge, breathing hard. Did we get them all? Duke listened. No cultist shrieks, no Broodlord screams, just silence. Won't know for sure until we go back and check. But if anything survived that. He trailed off, then grinned. Actually, that'd be impressive. You destroyed an entire section of the underhive. Do you have any idea how many people might have been living down here? Innocent civilians? Innocent civilians don't set up shop next to a Genestealer cult. Duke reloaded his pistol, waterlogged but still functional. Old Earth engineering was built to last. Anyone with sense moved out months ago. Anyone who stayed was either cult or cult adjacent. Kellis wanted to argue. Duke could see it in her eyes. But she'd seen the cultists, seen what they were building, seen the Broodlord. She knew what would have happened if the cult had been allowed to grow unchecked. The Commissar will want confirmation, she said finally. Bodies, evidence. Then we go back. It took an hour to navigate back to the collapsed chamber. The destruction was total. Millions of tons of rockcrete and metal forming a tomb that would take years to excavate. But Duke was thorough. He found cultist bodies at the edges, crushed and broken. He found one still twitching, its elongated skull cracked open, alien biology keeping it technically alive. He ended it with his boot. No sign of the Broodlord. Could it have escaped? Kellis asked, scanning the rubble with her recovered laser gun. Maybe. But even if it did, it's alone now. No cult, no infrastructure, no way to rebuild. Duke kicked a piece of debris, revealing more bodies. It's finished. Might take years to die, but it's finished. They were preparing to leave when Duke heard it. A scraping sound, rhythmic and deliberate. Something was moving beneath the rubble. Something big. Kellis, run. Now. She heard the tone in his voice and didn't argue. They backed toward the exit tunnel as the rubble began to shift. Debris rolled aside like water, and from the wreckage, bloodied and broken, but impossibly alive, the Broodlord emerged. 3 of its 4 arms were shattered. Its carapace was cracked, leaking ichor. 1 eye was gone, replaced by a crater of destroyed flesh. But it was alive, and it was focused entirely on Duke, with the kind of hatred that transcended species. Duke was out of missiles. Low on bolter ammunition, his Devastator was empty. He had his pistol, a few rounds, and the absolute certainty that this thing was about to kill him. The Broodlord charged, slower than before but still terrifyingly fast for something that should be dead. Duke fired, shots stitching across its torso. It didn't slow. 20 feet, 15. Duke's hand found something on his belt. The chainsword he'd taken from the Grogfang fight, forgotten until now. He yanked it free, triggered the activation stud. The teeth roared to life. 10 feet. Duke didn't retreat. He charged to meet it. The Broodlord swung with its one good arm, claws that could carve through ceramite, aiming for Duke's skull. Duke ducked, felt the air displacement as the blow missed by inches. He came up inside the creature's guard and drove the chainsword into its torso, angling up toward where he hoped vital organs lived. The chainsword bit deep, teeth chewing through alien flesh and bone. The Broodlord shrieked, that psychic scream that turned thought to static. Duke held on, twisted the blade, felt something important rupture. The creature's remaining good arm came around, claws raking across Duke's back. His tank top shredded, flesh tore. Pain, bright and immediate, flooded his nervous system. But Duke had been hurt before. He'd fought through broken bones, gunshot wounds, and alien toxins. He wasn't stopping now. He ripped the chainsword free and swung horizontally, aiming for the neck. The blade hit the junction between skull and shoulder, severing alien musculature and cutting deep into the spinal column. The Broodlord spasmed, its psychic scream cutting off mid-note. Duke kicked it away, raised the chainsword, and brought it down with every ounce of strength he had left. The blade punched through the Broodlord's skull, through its brain, through the chamber floor beneath it. The creature twitched once, twice, then went still. Duke stood there, breathing hard, covered in his own blood and alien ichor. The chainsword was still running, teeth spinning uselessly. He turned it off, let it drop. Kellis approached cautiously. Is it dead? Finally. Duke prodded the corpse with his boot. Someone should mount this thing, proof that even Tyranid bioforms can be killed by guys with good aim and bad attitudes. You're insane. I'm alive. There's a difference. Duke winced as adrenaline faded and pain reasserted itself. The wounds on his back were deep, probably needed medical attention he wasn't going to get. Help me burn this thing. I don't want anyone getting ideas about studying it. They used promethium from a nearby storage tank, dousing the Broodlord's corpse until it was soaked. Duke lit his last cigar, took a long drag, then tossed it onto the body. The flames caught instantly, blue-green from the alien biochemistry, hot enough that they had to back away. The Broodlord burned, and with it, the last remnant of the cult's power. The Commissar's going to want to report, Kellis said, watching the fire. Tell him the truth. We found the cult. We collapsed their nest. We killed the Broodlord. Mission accomplished. And you're wounded. I'll walk it off. Duke. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. You need medical attention. Those wounds, if they get infected down here, you'll die. Then I'll die clean. But even as he said it, Duke knew she was right. His back was a mess of torn flesh, and the underhive was a bacterial playground. Fine. We head back. But I'm not sitting in some Medicaid facility while the war continues. They began the long climb back to the surface, moving through tunnels and shafts that seemed darker now, emptier. The cult was gone, but its absence left a void, one that Duke suspected would be filled by something else soon enough. In the 41st millennium, peace was just the interval between catastrophes. Halfway up, Kelly spoke quietly. You didn't have to do this. Fight for us. Risk your life for a world that isn't yours. Duke thought about that. About Earth, distant and unreachable. About the Imperium, grinding its own people into dust. About soldiers like Kellis, competent and brave, trapped in a system that valued death over life. Maybe I did, he said. Maybe someone needs to show you people that there's another way. That you don't have to be martyrs to matter. Kellis was quiet for a long moment. Then, they'll kill you for that philosophy. The Imperium doesn't change. It crushes change. Let them try. Above them, Graxus Prime waited. A world at war, a civilization built on suffering, and one man who refused to accept that dying was the only way to serve. Duke Nukem was about to teach the 41st millennium a very old lesson from his universe. Surviving beats martyrdom, every damn time. The Medici facility was less hospital and more butcher shop with delusions of sanitation. Duke sat shirtless on a metal slab, while a hunched figure in red robes, a junior biologist adept of the Adeptus Mechanicus, examined his wounds with mechadendrites that looked like they belonged in a horror movie. Fascinating. The adept buzzed through vocal augmetics. Standard human physiology, yet tissue density exceeds baseline parameters by 17%. Muscle fiber composition suggests enhanced twitch response. Pain tolerance registering at... Just patch me up, Doc. Duke lit another liberated cigar, ignoring the no smoking sign written in high Gothic. I've got places to be. The Adept's mechadendrites deployed medical tools, sutures, synthetic skin grafts, antibacterial unguents that smelled like industrial cleaner. The process hurt. Duke didn't flinch. Inquisitor Hellstadt arrived halfway through the procedure, Interrogator Vash trailing behind her. She studied Duke with those cold, analytical eyes. Commissar Kratz's report was illuminating, she said. You destroyed an entire cult nest, killed a Broodlord in single combat, and survived wounds that would incapacitate most guardsmen, all with minimal support and no augmentation. Just doing what I do. Duke exhaled smoke. The cult's finished. You're welcome. The cult is contained. There's a difference. Hellstadt pulled up a holodisplay showing seismic readings. Your collapse triggered secondary failures throughout the underhive. 3 hab blocks lost structural integrity. Estimated civilian casualties, 4,000. Duke's expression hardened. You said the cult had been there for months. Anyone still living that close was either infected or willfully blind. Perhaps, but 4,000 deaths require justification. The administratum will demand an accounting. She dismissed the display. Fortunately, I'm adept at managing bureaucracy. The official record will show a regrettable mining accident. Your involvement will be classified. How generous. It's pragmatism. You're too useful to waste on administrative execution. Hellstadt moved closer, lowering her voice. But Duke, we need to discuss your philosophy. My what? Sergeant Kellis's report included some concerning statements. You told her that soldiers don't have to be martyrs to matter, that survival is preferable to glorious death, that the Imperium's doctrines are, and I quote, built on suffering. Duke met her gaze without blinking. All true, all heretical. But there was no heat in her voice, only calculation. The Imperium functions because billions of souls believe dying for the Emperor is the highest calling. Faith sustains us. Sacrifice strengthens us. Your philosophy undermines 10,000 years of doctrine. Your doctrine is killing you faster than any Xenos invasion. You treat soldiers like ammunition, use them up, requisition more. No wonder your casualty rates are astronomical. Interrogator Vash stepped forward, his hand resting on his sidearm. You go too far, Outlander. The Inquisitor has shown remarkable patience, but... Stand down, Vash. Hellstadt's tone was sharp. She studied Duke for a long moment. You're not wrong. The Imperium is unsustainable. We lose 1 million soldiers daily across 1 million worlds. We press children into service, execute deserters by the 1,000, and pray that sheer numbers will overcome our enemies. Her expression was unreadable. But what's the alternative? We're surrounded by forces that want humanity extinct. Every moment we hesitate, we lose ground. The alternative is fighting smarter, valuing your soldiers' lives, training them properly instead of throwing conscripts at the problem. Duke gestured at his wounds, now bandaged in synthetic skin. I killed a Genestealer Broodlord with a chainsword and bad attitude. Imagine what properly trained, properly equipped soldiers could do. The Imperium doesn't have resources for properly equipped. We barely have resources to maintain current deployments. Then stop fighting wars you can't win. Pick your battles. Prioritize survival over expansion. Retreat is heresy. Surrender is death. Then you're trapped in a suicide pact with your own ideology. Duke stood, testing his mobility. The wounds pulled but held. Here's the thing about my universe. We fought to live, not to die. And you know what? We're still around. Can your Imperium say the same in another 10,000 years? Hellstadt was silent. Vash looked like he wanted to shoot Duke where he stood. The biologist's adept had stopped working, mechadendrites frozen mid-motion, listening. Finally, Hellstadt spoke. The Ork Wa has regrouped. They're launching a final assault on Hive Primus, our command center and last defensible position. If it falls, Graxus Prime falls. The Mechanicus will trigger orbital weapons and scorch the entire planet, rather than let the Orks claim the forges. Exterminatus, Duke said, recognizing the term from his briefings. Genocide as strategy. Classy. Necessary. The forges produce weapons for 17 sectors. Their loss would cripple Imperial war efforts across 3 segmentum. Hellstadt's expression was grim. We have 72 hours, maybe less. And you want me to do what? Kill all the Orks single-handedly? I want you to do what you do best. Disrupt, destroy, survive. She pulled out a data slate, brought up tactical schematics. The Orks are led by Warboss Grimskull, a beast even by greenskin standards. He's united 5 separate waves under his banner. Unprecedented coordination. Kill him, and the Orks fracture into infighting. So same plan as before. Kill the boss, let nature take its course. Essentially. But Grimskull isn't Grogfang. He's larger, meaner, and protected by an elite retinue of knobs. Orc champions. You'll be outnumbered 100 to 1. Duke grinned. Finally, a challenge. You'll need support. I'm assigning you a kill team. Sergeant Kellis, Interrogator Vash, and 2 Tempestus Scions from the Ordo Xenos Reserve. I work better alone, and you'll die alone. Accept the support, or I'll have you confined to quarters until the evacuation. Hellstadt's tone brooked no argument. This isn't optional, Duke. Grimskull must die, and you're the only one with a proven record against Orc leadership. Duke considered. He'd always been a solo operator, easier to move fast, make decisions without committee approval, and not worry about collateral damage. But the kill team Hellstadt was proposing wasn't standard Imperial Guard. Kellis had proven competent. Vash seemed capable despite his rigid devotion, and Tempestus Scions were supposedly the Imperium's elite, actual special forces instead of conscripts with guns. Fine, but we do it my way. No heroic charges, no martyrdom complexes. We get in, kill the target, and get out. Agreed. Hellstadt transmitted coordinates to Duke's Vox bead. Grimskull's position is in the industrial wastes, 300 kilometers north. He's preparing for the final assault. You have 48 hours to infiltrate and eliminate him before the main Orc force mobilizes. And if we fail, then Grax's prime burns, and you die with the rest of us. Hellstadt turned to leave, then paused. Duke Nukem, you asked what happens to your philosophy if it spreads. If soldiers start believing they can survive instead of die. Yeah? The answer is revolution. The commissariat would purge entire regiments. The ecclesiarchy would declare a crusade against heretical thought. Billions would die to preserve the status quo. She looked back at him. But you already knew that, and you don't care. I care. I just think preserving a broken system isn't worth billions of lives. Then you're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most dangerous. Hellstadt's smile was cold. I haven't decided which. After she left, Vash remained, studying Duke with open hostility. You think you understand the Imperium after a few days? Vash said. You don't. This civilization has survived 10,000 years of horrors you can't imagine. Our methods work because they have to. Your methods work until they don't. Then you just blame heretics and move on. You mock what you don't understand. The Emperor protects those who serve with faith. Doubt is weakness. Questioning is corruption. In my universe, questioning is how we survived. We adapted, evolved, learned from mistakes. Duke grabbed his torn tank top, examining the damage. Unsalvageable. He'd need to scavenge Imperial gear. Your way breeds stagnation. Eventually, something's going to come along that faith can't stop. Then we'll die fighting, as the Emperor wills. See, that's the problem. You've accepted death as inevitable. I haven't. Duke moved toward the door. Tell Kellis and the Scions to meet me at the North Gate in 2 hours. And Vash, try not to get yourself killed proving a point. I've seen enough martyrs for one lifetime. He left the Medici facility and walked through Hive Tertius's corridors, passing soldiers who stared at him with mixtures of awe, confusion, and fear. Word had spread. The man who killed Grogfung, who destroyed a Genestealer cult, who fought without faith and survived anyway. Duke understood what he represented to these people. Hope, possibility. The idea that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. And in the 41st millennium, where hope was heresy and possibility was death, that made him the most dangerous thing on Grax's prime. More dangerous than the Orks. More dangerous than the Genestealers. dangerous because he was proving that the Imperium's foundational lie, that only through suffering could humanity survive, was exactly that. A lie. Duke found a supply depot, requisitioned Imperial combat gear to replace his shredded clothing, and prepared for the mission ahead. Somewhere in the industrial wastes, Warboss Grimskull was gathering his horde for one final, apocalyptic assault. And Duke Nukem, action hero from a universe where heroes didn't have to die to matter, was going to teach the biggest, baddest orc on the planet a very simple lesson. Nobody out-toughs the Duke. The north gate of Hive Tertius was a rusted monstrosity of adamantium and prayer seals, groaning open just wide enough to spit out Duke's kill team into the industrial wastes beyond. The air outside was a toxic soup of chemical runoff and ash, stinging the eyes and coating the tongue with a metallic film. The landscape was a graveyard of industry. Skeletal remains of refineries, mountains of scrap, and the husks of titans so vast, their fallen forms created new terrain. Duke's new team was a study in contrasts. Sergeant Kellis stood solid and reliable in her flak armor, her laser gun held with professional ease. Interrogator Vash was a statue of black carapace and simmering disapproval, his hellgun cradled like a holy relic. The two Tempestus scions, identified only by their helmet designations Striker and Anvil, were silent, hulking presences in their full armor, their movements synchronized to an unnerving degree. "All right, listen up," Duke began, adjusting the strap of his newly acquired bolt gun, a heavier, more reliable version of the pistol. "We're not here to fight a war. We're here to win an assassination. We move fast, hit hard, and get the hell out before they know what happened. Questions?" Vash spoke first, his voice tight. "Our objective is the elimination of Warboss Grimskull. Standard doctrine dictates we identify, isolate, and eliminate the target with maximum prejudice. We are instruments of the Emperor's will." "We're instruments of getting the job done," Duke corrected. "Your maximum prejudice usually means maximum casualties. On my watch, we go for minimum. Kelly's, you're on point scouting. Your eyes are better than their augers in this junk." He gestured to the scions. "You two, heavy support. When I give the signal, you lay down, suppressing fire so loud they think the sky is falling. Vash, you're with me. You're the backup plan if my plan, which never fails, somehow fails." Vash's jaw tightened. "Your arrogance is a liability. My arrogance is a proven asset. Let's move." They advanced into the wastes, a single small knot of humanity in an ocean of green. The journey was a tense, silent trek through a nightmare. They passed through valleys of wrecked tanks, the ground churned to mud by orc treads. They skirted around active fighting pits, where orcs brawled for sport, the roars and the sickening cracks of bone echoing for miles. The sheer scale of the Wa was staggering. It was less an army and more a migrating ecosystem of violence. After 6 hours of grueling travel, Kellis signaled a halt from a ridge overlooking a massive, cratered basin. At its center, surrounded by a teeming, roaring sea of green bodies, was Warboss Grimskull. He was a monster, a titan of muscle and scrap metal standing 5 meters tall. One of his arms was a hydraulic-powered claw large enough to crush a Lehman Russ tank. The other ended in a Gatling-style shooter with 6 spinning barrels, each the size of a human thigh. His jaw was a mess of iron tusks, and his voice was a seismic roar that shook the very ground. "Target identified," Vash whispered, his helmet's optics whirring as he zoomed in. Heavily guarded, at least 50 nobs in his immediate retinue. Thousands of boys between our position and his. "This is impossible," Kellis breathed, her face pale. We'd need an entire company of Astartes to punch through that. Astartes would charge in and die gloriously, Duke said, not taking his eyes off the Warboss. We're not doing that. He scanned the basin, his mind working, cross-referencing the terrain with 1,000 other battlefields from his past. His gaze settled on a half-collapsed ore processor, a gigantic rusted structure that leaned precariously over the western edge of the Ork encampment. There, he said, pointing. That's our ticket. The structure is unstable. Anvil, one of the scions, stated flatly. Collapse probability is significant. That's the idea. Duke laid out his plan with brutal simplicity. Kellis, you and the scions get to the high ground on the opposite ridge. On my signal, you hit their rear flank with everything you've got. Grenade launchers, hot shot volleys, make it sound like the entire Imperial Guard is knocking. It'll pull most of the mob away from Grimskull. And you? Vash asked, suspicion dripping from the word. Vash and I are going to that processor. When the mob turns to face your distraction, we plant every explosive we have on the main support leg. We drop several thousand tons of scrap metal right on the Warboss's head. Vash was silent for a moment. It is an unorthodox application of force, but it avoids a direct, honorable engagement. Honor gets you dead. Results get you a beer. Duke handed his remaining pipe bombs and the scions' crack grenades to Vash. You're the demo expert. Make it count. Splitting up was the most dangerous part. Kellis and the scions melted into the shadows, moving with a grace that belied their heavy armor. Duke and Vash made for the processor, a nerve-wracking crawl through fields of scrap and past snoring Ork sentries. The stench of unwashed fungus and crude oil was overwhelming. They reached the base of the colossal structure undetected. Up close, the groans of stressed metal were a constant symphony of impending doom. Vash immediately went to work, his hands moving with practiced precision as he placed the charges on the critical structural points Duke identified. Below, the Ork camp throbbed with primal energy. Grimskull was bellowing, smashing two knobs together for his amusement, while a mob of Gretchen scrambled to polish his armor. Charges set, Vash reported. Detonation will be simultaneous. The structure will fall along a predictable trajectory. Good. Duke keyed his Vox bead. Kellis, light him up. A moment later, the far side of the basin erupted in a storm of last fire and explosions. A tempestuous grenade detonated an Ork fuel dump, sending a fireball 100 feet into the air. The effect was instantaneous. The Ork horde, ever hungry for a fight, turned as one and began charging toward the new threat, bellowing with gleeful rage. Just as Duke predicted, Grimskull was left with only his immediate bodyguard of 20 knobs. The Warboss roared in frustration, turning to see who was stealing his fight. Now, Vash! Vash pressed the detonator. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. A flicker of panic crossed his normally stoic face. The signal is being blocked. Warp, damn it! The Ork's psychic field must be disrupting the low-frequency transmission. Duke didn't hesitate. Manual override. You've got primers? Yes, but the fuses are short. 30 seconds. You cannot reach them in time. Watch me. Duke snatched the prime detonator pack from Vash's hands and triggered the timers. A series of red lights began a frantic countdown. 30, 29, 28. He ignited his jet boots. The experimental thrusters screamed, launching him in a low arc over the Ork camp. He wasn't aiming for the charges. He was aiming for Grimskull. He landed directly in front of the Warboss, boots skidding in the dirt. The 20 knobs turned, their tiny eyes widening in surprise. Grimskull looked down, his massive head tilting in confusion, The human had delivered himself. "You to get who's been killing me, bosses?" Grimskull's voice was like continents grinding together. "I'm the guy who's about to ruin your whole day." Duke's eyes flicked to the timer on the pack in his hand. 15, 14. He threw the prime detonator, not at the Warboss, but at the base of his throne, a pile of scrap directly beneath the leaning processor. Grimskull laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "A bomb! He brought me a bomb." He swatted the pack away like a fly. It skittered across the ground, coming to rest against the processor's main support column. 8, 7, 6. The knobs raised their weapons. Grimskull raised his claw, ready to smash Duke into paste. Duke triggered his holoduke. A perfect decoy appeared 5 feet to the left. The knobs, confused, opened fire on the hologram. 3, 2. Duke turned and ran, his jet boots flaring for one last, desperate burst of speed. The world turned white, then orange, then black. The simultaneous detonation of the crack grenades and pipe bombs was a thunderclap that dwarfed all other sound. The primary support column of the ore processor vanished in a cloud of shrapnel and fire. With a groan that became a shriek, the entire structure gave way. Thousands of tons of metal tilting in slow, inevitable motion before crashing down into the basin. The impact was an extinction-level event. The ground bucked, throwing Duke from his feet. A shockwave of dust and debris rolled out, obliterating everything in its path. Orks were crushed, thrown, or buried alive. The roar was absolute. When the dust began to settle, silence fell. The ore processor lay like a felled beast across the center of the camp. There was no sign of Grimskull or his knobs. They had been erased. Duke pushed himself to his feet, ears ringing, body aching. He saw Vash emerging from cover, Kellis and the Scions already making their way down the ridge, picking off the stunned, leaderless Orks who remained. Vash approached, stopping a few feet away. He looked from the apocalyptic scene to Duke, his expression unreadable behind his helmet. Finally, he spoke, his voice stripped of its earlier hostility, replaced by something akin to awe. You used yourself as bait. You gambled your life on a 30-second fuse and an Ork's predictable reaction. Duke wiped blood from a cut on his lip. He was predictable. Big, tough, and dumb. They always are. He looked out at the devastation, at the broken wall. The boss is dead. The Orks will tear each other apart for the next year trying to find a new one. Mission accomplished. Vash was silent for a long moment. There is no doctrine for this, no protocol. What you did was insane. But it worked, with minimal casualties. It should not have worked. That's the thing about your Imperium, Vash, Duke said, turning to face him. You're so busy following the rules, you've forgotten how to win. The interrogator didn't argue. He just stared at the fallen processor. And for the first time, Duke saw the cracks in his absolute faith. He saw the dawning, terrifying realization that there might be another way. And Duke knew that was a victory far more dangerous and far more important than killing any war boss. The victory over Warboss Grimskull did not end the war for Graxus Prime, but it broke its back. The Ork, bereft of its unifying figure, dissolved into 100 squabbling mobs that turned their weapons on each other with the same enthusiasm they had once reserved for the Imperium. The remaining Imperial forces, bolstered by the sudden reprieve, launched a series of methodical counter-offensives, cleansing the hive cities one sector at a time. The planet would be scarred for generations, but it would remain in human hands. The Mechanicus stood down the exterminatus protocols. For Duke Nukem, the real battle was just beginning. He stood in Inquisitor Hellstadt's command center, the air thick with the scent of ozone and sanctified incense. The holo displays now showed stable front lines and diminishing enemy contacts. Hellstadt stood before him, her hands clasped behind her back, while Interrogator Vash and Sergeant Kellis flanked her, their presence a silent testament to the report that had already been filed. The Ordo Xenos has concluded its assessment of the Graxis Prime incident. Hellstadt began, her voice devoid of any celebratory tone. Warboss Grimskull is confirmed eliminated. The Genestealer cult is purged. The planet is secured. By any metric, your contribution was decisive. Duke nodded, waiting for the other boot to drop. He could feel it in the tension thrumming in the air, in the way Vash refused to meet his eyes, in the protective stiffness of Kellis's posture. However, Hellstadt continued, your methods and your philosophy represent a clear and present danger to the Imperium. Sergeant Kellis's after-action report details your repeated blasphemies, your disregard for Imperial doctrine, and your successful propagation of what the Commissariat is terming survivalist heresy. I taught them to value their lives. The horror, Duke said flatly. The horror, Hellstadt echoed, her gaze icy, is that it works. Soldiers in the 2847th are now questioning commissarial authority. They are employing flanking maneuvers without orders. They are prioritizing cover and ammunition conservation over glorious charges. The contagion is spreading. Good. Maybe they'll live long enough to actually win this war for you. There is no winning the long war, Duke Nukem. There is only enduring. She took a step forward. Commissar Krat has formally petitioned for your execution. The petition is supported by 3 regimental commanders and a representative of the Adeptus Ministorum. They see you not as a savior, but as a virus. And what do you see? I see a weapon of incalculable value and unimaginable risk. A weapon I cannot, in good conscience, destroy. But neither can I allow you to remain here, unraveling the very fabric of our military discipline. She activated a data slate and slid it across the table. These are your orders. Duke picked it up. It was a writ of passage, granting him safe conduct aboard the Imperial freighter Truth's Light, currently orbiting Graxis Prime. Its destination was the Golgotha sector, a region of space reportedly rife with Xenos incursions, pirate activity, and heresy. You're exiling me. I am deploying you, Hellstadt corrected. The Golgotha sector is a bleeding ulcer on the flank of the Imperium. It is a place where dogma has failed and conventional tactics have led to stalemate after stalemate. It is, in short, a place where your particular talents might be tolerated, where the reports of your heresies will be lost in the cacophony of greater conflicts. Duke looked from Hellstadt to Kellis, whose face was a mask of conflicted loyalty, to Vash, who finally met his gaze. The interrogator gave a single, sharp nod. It wasn't approval, it was acknowledgement. And if I refuse? Duke asked. Then Commissar Krat's firing squad is waiting in the courtyard. The choice is binary, as all things are in the Imperium, service or death. Duke laughed, a short, harsh sound. You people and your binaries. Fine, I'll go. This planet's beer is terrible anyway. He turned to leave, but Kellis's voice stopped him. Sir, Duke, what you did here, it mattered. To us, the soldiers you didn't see. They're calling you the unmartyred. They say you fight like the Emperor's angel, but think like a free man. Duke looked at her, at the spark of something that hadn't been there before. Not just hope, but defiance. Keep that spark alive, Sergeant. Don't let them grind it out of you. He then looked at Vash. You learned anything, kid? Vash's composure cracked for a single human moment. I have learned that the universe is more complex than my teachings allowed, and that is a dangerous thing to know. He straightened. The Emperor protects. Yeah, Duke said, adjusting his sunglasses. But I protect better. His departure from Hive Tertius was a quiet affair. In stark contrast to his arrival, there was no fanfare, no ceremony. Just a lone figure in a borrowed Imperial greatcoat over his jeans and a new black tank top, walking through the battered gates. He carried his bolt gun, a freshly stocked supply of explosives, and the silent, simmering legacy of his brief time on Graxus Prime. As the ground transport carried him to the landing pad, he passed a unit of the 2847th Drilling. They weren't practicing bayonet charges. They were practicing fire and maneuver tactics, using cover effectively. A junior commissar was watching them, his face a thundercloud of disapproval. But he did not stop them. The change had taken root. At the landing pad, the Truth's light waited. A blocky, utilitarian vessel that smelled of rust and recycled air. As he walked up the ramp, Duke took one last look at the grim, gray sky of Graxus Prime. He hadn't found a way home. He'd barely made a dent in the Imperium's endless war. But he had planted a seed of doubt, a seed of self-preservation. In the barren soil of the 41st Millennium, that was a revolutionary act. The ramp hissed closed, sealing him in the metal belly of the ship. The engines whined to life, and the freighter began its ascent, breaking through the atmosphere and into the cold, star-dusted void. Duke Nukem found his assigned quarters, a cramped cell with a metal cot, and sat down. On a small, rusted table, someone had left a bottle of Amasec and a single, unlit cigar. A final, silent gesture from a soldier who had learned to hope. He lit the cigar, took a long pull, and poured a measure of the harsh liquor. The ship shuddered as it entered the warp. The universe outside the viewport dissolving into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors. He was adrift in a universe of nightmares, a place where his very existence was heresy. He was alone, hunted by the very people he helped, and farther from home than any human had ever been. A slow, confident grin spread across his face. He was exactly where he belonged. The story of Duke Nukem on Graxus Prime became a whisper, a ghost story told in the trenches of 1,000 other war zones. The tale of the unmartyred, the man who fought without faith and taught soldiers to survive, could not be eradicated by commissarial decree. It was a subtle poison in the Imperium's veins, a proof of concept that there was an alternative to the grim calculus of sacrificial warfare. Inquisitor Hellstadt contained the immediate threat, but the ideological spark had escaped quarantine. Duke Nukem did not become a hero of the Imperium. He became something far more potent and dangerous, a rumor of competence in a galaxy drowning in dogma. In the Golgotha sector and beyond, he would continue his one-man war, not for the God Emperor, not for the Imperium, but for the simple, radical idea that life was worth fighting for, and that victory was not measured in martyrs, but in survivors. He became a rogue variable in the Imperium's bleak equation, a man forever out of place, yet perfectly suited to challenge the darkness not with pious self-destruction, but with unshakable, arrogant, and utterly effective defiance. The 41st Millennium had met a force it could not comprehend and could not control. A man who truly believed that kicking ass was a higher calling than dying.